My name is Mark, and yes, cancer sucks. Life doesn't have to. This is my story. I just realized something. I haven't even mentioned this entire time that I still have cancer, by the way. Uh, Thyroid cancer this time. It's my second one to ever get. I probably should have started with that at some point, but I think in order to properly tell my story the right way, I like to do it chronologically. So starting with my Hodgkin's lymphoma is where I wanted to be at first. But yeah, just so you know, I still do have cancer. I know I may not look the part, and it's awesome I get to keep my hair this time, but I still got it. So anyways, carrying on. The thing I've wanted to say for the longest time, and I think some people have heard this, is that cancer is not my real cancer. There was a reason I've been saying that when I went through Hodgkin's lymphoma these 8-9 years ago, that it didn't impact my faith, and it didn't really impact or change anything about who I was or how I acted in terms of being a follower of Christ. It's because cancer was not the real cancer in my life. So let's go back, right? Chemotherapy is a kind of a paradoxical thing, right? Its goal is to, overall, the goal of chemotherapy is to make you better. However, to do that, it tears you down. It puts all of your levels at their lowest point. It kills, yes, its goal is to kill the bad cells, but it kills good cells too. It makes you sick. It makes you the most vulnerable you'll ever be. And yeah, it sucks. That's just the way it is. I went through 4 cycles of chemotherapy, and it was about, I think, 12 days total over the span of 12 weeks, although there would be some multiple days a week, where I would just be, taking medicines in a hospital bed. I've already mentioned how being bald wasn't fun. It makes it noticeable to the people around you that clearly something's not right. But that's the way it was. So I got done with my 4 cycles. And believe it or not, what was supposed to be a year-long process of treatment, whether that's chemotherapy and radiation or whatnot, combination of everything, was supposed to take about a year. However, in 92 days, again, I'm one of the lucky ones, I was already declared cancer-free. Stage 2A was only 92 days, but man, it felt like a couple of years, just being in the moment. So after chemo is radiation, right? For me, radiation was unnecessary, in my opinion. Radiation was, it was a flip of a coin, to be honest. I was already declared cancer-free, and they said, okay, well, you're still on this study. Heads or tails, do you get it or not? Well, whichever is the bad side, that's what I got. So I went through 14 days of that. And again, radiation is one of those funny things. You can't sense it. I think I could smell it, but I don't think so. But it was kind of freaky because they would strap you down to this table and you'd have to not be claustrophobic and just stay still. But it was like you couldn't sense it. You couldn't tell when it was actually happening to you. And yet, at some point later, you'd still be sick and whatnot and have all these effects from it. And it kept my hair from growing back in the back for quite a while. But it's one of those things that, at the time and up front, and to what we can perceive, it almost seems unnecessary. When in fact, under the surface, it makes a lot of difference. So, the story goes, I was coming up on 8 years cancer-free, where as a result of my radiation, I had to start taking some thyroid medicine. And we'd have regular checkups with the doctor there, and sure enough, he discovered more bumps. So now I'm in the latter stages of going through thyroid cancer. But cancer is not the real cancer of my life. It's sin. And I'm not just limiting it to one particular sin in my life. I'm saying that cancer doesn't have this whole, sin doesn't have this whole magnitude to it of one sin is worse than the other. It's sin. So I mentioned chemo tears you down. Its goal is to make you better, but it takes you to your most vulnerable places. Chemo, for me, wasn't the medicines I took. It was my community. It was my Bible studies in college that you would look around the room, you would identify with people, but in the strangest of ways. You would talk about your struggles. You would talk about things you needed help with, things that you needed to give to God. That to me was chemo. I'd never been vulnerable like that. I'd never put myself in a place with all my emotions on the table, with anything of that sort of nature. For me, chemo was my community. Radiation, and this new cancer, if you will, has been a reminder that there is this ongoing discipleship process. Radiation, I felt it was unnecessary. And I think a lot of people get this feeling of whenever they just become a Christian that, well, now all I need to know is what I know now. And they get caught up in this notion of, I know that I am a Christian, therefore I can live how I want. Radiation to me was discipleship to follow. And this new cancer, in actual physical cancer in my life, is just a reminder to me how our goal should always be to continue to find ways to eradicate sin in our lives so that it doesn't come back. I know it's crazy looking on that side of things if you haven't had cancer before, if you haven't had a life-threatening disease before, and to say that cancer wasn't the real thing that was killing me. But trust me when I say sin kills more than any disease. There's only one route that sin takes or ends with. There's only one end game for sin, and that's death. That's the real cancer in my life. And if there's anything I want you to hear out of my story, it's that. It's that, yeah, these next couple weeks and months and these last who knows how many years, I've been bald-headed. I've been sick as mess. I've been down to the weakest points I've ever had. But none of that compares to the things that result in your life as a result of not getting rid of the sin in your life. The depression that follows, the loneliness, the isolation you get into, that to me is tougher to go through than cancer. So if you're in that position, get out of it. Because you have a choice to eradicate sin in your life. Even though you might not have a choice to eradicate cancer. You can't just snap your fingers and say, okay, I don't want this in my life anymore. You have that choice to follow Christ. That's the difference. And yes, I'm telling the story from the perspective of a lucky one. One that my first cancer was stage 2A. The one I have now is stage 1. I realize that I haven't had it as bad as other people, but I still think you can grasp the fact that knowing the real cancer in your life overshadows the fact that I'm telling this story from a perspective of mine's probably not as bad as yours. The goal wasn't for me to... Again, cancer is a dangerous blessing because, yes, I haven't had it as bad as other people, but saying I've had cancer at least gets your attention. When the fact is, the cancer I'm talking about, you have it right now. Have you diagnosed yourself? Because I was living in this undiagnosed period where I had this cancer, this sin in my life. And I didn't call it out for what it really was. It was just underneath the surface, just existing. And it wasn't until I called out sin for what it really was that I even had a chance at being cancer-free. That's my story. That's my story. So this is it. This is, I guess, the real reason why I feel that I'm okay being called the cancer kid.